Hello, and welcome to the 61st episode of Scripture in a Year, hosted by Saints Peter and Paul Orthodox Church in the Albanian Archdiocese of the OCA. Today's reading is First Book of Kingdoms, or First Samuel, chapters 5 to 8. The Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. And the Philistines took the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of their god Dagon. They set it by Dagon, and when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, they entered the house of Dagon, and they looked, and beheld Dagon falling on his face in the presence of the ark of God. So they raised Dagon and returned it to its place. And the hand of the Lord was heavy upon Ashdod. He tormented all within her borders. He smote them in their private parts. Then it came to pass, when they arose early in the morning, behold, Dagon had again fallen on his face before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And the head of Dagon and both the palms of his hands were broken off, each in front of the threshold. And both the wrists of his hands were leaning on the doorway. Only the torso of Dagon remained. So to this day the priests of Dagon and any who come into the house of Dagon do not tread on, but step over the threshold of the house of Dagon in Ashdod because of this. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod. He came upon them, and in their ships. He brought forth disease among them. He infested their country with mice, and there was a great calamity of death in the city. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh upon us and Dagon our God. Therefore they sent and brought together all the lords of the Philistines in the same place, and said, What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And the people of Gath said, Let the ark of God of Israel come to us. So the ark of God came to Gath. And it came to be, after it entered Gath, that the hand of the Lord came upon the city. An extremely great state of confusion struck the men of the city, both small and great. He struck them in their private parts, and they made for themselves images of these. Then they sent away the ark of God to Ashkelon. And it came about, when the ark of God came to Ashkelon, the people of Ashkelon cried out, saying, Why did you turn the ark of the God of Israel toward us to kill us and our people? So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, Send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it return to its own place, so it does not kill us and our people. For it came about that a widespread panic of death spread throughout the entire city. And the living and those not dying were struck in their private parts, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven. For 7 months the ark was in their country of the Philistines, and their land was infested with mice. And the Philistines called for their priests, their prophets, and their enchanters, saying, What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Instruct us as to how we should return it to its place. So they said, If you send away the ark of the covenant of the God of Israel, do not send it away empty. Instead, give it as an offering for the plague. Then you shall be healed and be atoned for. Otherwise his hand may never be removed from you. Then they said, What shall we offer to him for this torment? They answered, 5 golden emerods for each of the number of the lords of the Philistines, since the same offense was on all of you, on your leaders and the people. And for each lord add a gold mouse that images the mice utterly ravaging your land. Then you shall give glory to the Lord. Perhaps he may lighten his hand from you, from off your gods, and from off your land. Why do you yet harden your hearts, as did Egypt, and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? Was it not when he mocked them that they let the people go, and they departed? Now, therefore, make a new wagon, and take 2 cows with firstborn calves, and hitch the cows to the wagon. But lead the newborn calves to the pen. Now take the ark, and set it on the wagon, and place the offering of the golden vessels you shall render to him in a chest next to it. And send it away, and let it depart. Then you shall see, if it goes through Beth Shemesh by way of the coasts, then he brought upon us this great evil. But if not, then we shall know his hand did not touch us, but only by mere chance. And the Philistines did so. They took 2 cows, each having firstborn calves, and hitched them to the wagon, putting the calves into the pen. Onto the wagon they placed the ark and the chest and the mice made of gold. The cows went straight ahead by way of Beth Shemesh, on the only beaten path. They proceeded and labored and did not turn aside either to the right or to the left. And the lords of the Philistines followed it to the border of Beth Shemesh. Now the men of Beth-Shemesh were in the valley to reap the harvest of their wheat. They lifted up their eyes, and they saw the ark of the Lord, and they rejoiced to greet it. The wagon came to a stop in the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh. And next to the wagon they set a large stone. They split the wood of the wagon and offered the cows as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took up the ark of the Lord, and with it the chest and the gold vessels, and put them on the large stone. And on this day the men of Beth-Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. So when the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned on the same day to Ashkelon. These are the places the gold emerods were given as an offering to the Lord: one for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, and one for Gath, and one for Ekron. And the gold mice were according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, from the cities being fortified as far as the villages of Pharazite, and as far as the great stone where they placed the ark of the covenant of the Lord in the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh. Now the sons of Jeconiah were not pleased, nor were the people of Beth-Shemesh, because as they looked at the ark of the Lord smote 50,070 men from among them. And the people mourned because of the people the Lord smote such a deadly blow. And the men of Beth-Shemesh said, Who shall be able to come before this holy Lord? And to whom shall the ark of the Lord go up from us? So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kirjath-Jearim, saying, The Philistines have brought back the ark of the Lord, so come down and take it up with you. Then the men of Kirjath-Jearim came and brought up the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and brought it to the house of Abinadab on the hill. They consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the covenant of the Lord safe. As it came to pass from that very day, the ark was in Kirjath-Jearim, and the days multiplied to become 20 years, and all the house of Israel watched for the Lord. Then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, If you return to the Lord with all your hearts, if you put away the foreign gods and the sacred groves from among you, and if you prepare your hearts for the Lord and serve him alone, he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. So the sons of Israel removed the Baals and the sacred groves for the Ashtoreths, and served the Lord alone. And Samuel said, Gather all Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered at Mizpah, drew water, and poured it out upon the earth before the Lord. And there they fasted on that day, and said, We sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the sons of Israel at Mizpah. When the Philistines heard that the sons of Israel had gathered at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines marched up against Israel. And when the sons of Israel heard of it, they were afraid before the Philistines. So the sons of Israel said to Samuel, Do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, and he will save us from the hand of the Philistines. And Samuel took one suckling lamb and offered it with all the people as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. Then Samuel cried out to the Lord concerning Israel, and the Lord heard him. Now as Samuel was offering the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to do battle against Israel, but the Lord thundered with a loud noise against the Philistines that day, and so confused them that they were overcome before Israel. And the men of Israel went out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and struck them down below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took one stone and set it up between Mizpah and the older one, and called it Ebenezer, a stone of help, saying, The Lord helped us here. So the Lord humbled the Philistines, and they no longer came into the territory of Israel. And the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. And the cities which the Philistines took from the children of Israel were returned. They returned them to Israel from Ekron to Gath, and they took the coast of Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. There was peace between Israel and the Amorites, and Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. He went yearly on a circuit to Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah, and he judged Israel in all those holy places. But he always returned to Ramah, for his home was there, and there he judged Israel, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Now when Samuel was old, he made his sons judges over Israel. And these were the names of his sons. The firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. Then all the men of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, Look, you have become old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now establish a king for us, to judge us like all the rest of the nations. But this was evil in the eyes of Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, Heed the voice of the people in whatever they might say to you, for they have not rejected you, but rather they have rejected me, to bring to naught my reign over them. In everything they did to me since the day I brought them up from Egypt, even to this day, they have forsaken me, and have served other gods. So too they are doing this to you. Now listen to their voice, only you shall testify solemnly to them, and announce to them the custom of the king who will reign over them. So Samuel spoke all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And he said, This will be the custom of the king who shall reign over you. He will take your sons and put them in his chariots, and among his horsemen, and running before his chariots. And for himself he will appoint them as captains over his thousands, and captains over his hundreds, and to harvest his crop and gather his vintage, and to make his weapons of war and instruments for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. And he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and your vintage, and give it to his eunuchs and servants. And he will take your male servants, your female servants, your finest cattle, and your donkeys, and take 1/10 of them for his work. He will take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. Then in that day you will cry out before your king, whom you chose for yourself, and the Lord will not hear you in those days, because you chose a king for yourself. But the people were unwilling to listen to Samuel, and they said to him, No, rather it is that we want a king to be over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, and our king will judge us, and go out before us and fight our battles. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and repeated them in the hearing of the Lord. So the Lord said to Samuel, Heed their voice, and make them a king. And Samuel said to the men of Israel, Let every man go to his city. Here ends the reading for today.